Hello and welcome to this week's Metals and Markets podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson of SD Bullion. Another strange week in financial markets as hoopla for what the Federal Reserve was going to do with targeted interest rates was once again visited upon us. This past Wednesday, June 19, 2019, the U.S. Central Bank, Federal Reserve, and its Open Market Committee decided to leave interest rates unchanged. Yet they also hinted at standing ready to cut interest rates in the months to come to potentially accommodate financial markets as a possible recession draws near. Last week, our guest David Jensen pointed out that the last two federal fund rate cycle cuts were closely intertwined and followed by financial market recessions. So the ongoing meme that somehow, if the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, is going to be good for financial markets in the long run remains dubious based on past cycles. What you're looking at right now is a Bloomberg chart tweeted on Wednesday by Real Vision's Raoul, and it shows the full fiat currency era in terms of Fed funds rate cycle cuts versus recessionary timeframes. Correlation is not perfect, but about 75% of the time, the Fed's cutting of interest rates was closely followed by financial market valuation losses for the mass of U.S. stock shareholders. Turning to the gold and silver markets, on the day of this recording, 7:45 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, June 19, 2019, the silver spot price reacted positively to the news that the Federal Reserve is likely to go full dovish with accommodative policies. We are closing the day with the silver spot price around $15.20 per troy ounce in full fiat US dollars. As for the gold price, a similar story with the day closing $1,365 per ounce in fiat Federal Reserve notes. Remains to be seen if gold can find enough strength to plow through this long-running $1,400 an ounce resistance level anytime soon, or will it simply be a little later for gold to resume its long-awaited upside swing in price. The gold-silver ratio has fallen below the near 30-year high mark of 90, closing the day's trading at 89.5 ounces of silver to afford 1 mere troy ounce of gold. If we end up seeing federal fund rates cut and the US dollar somehow strengthen into the end of the summer, don't be surprised to see this ratio climb a bit higher and possibly threaten the 1930 Great Depression-esque 100 level. For more thoughts on the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision to stay put, but we might cut rates soon communication this week, I suggest checking out the 30-minute conversation I had Wednesday midday with Silver Doctor's Paul Halfdollar Eberhard on our Silver Doctors YouTube channel. I'll leave a link to that video in our full show notes. As for this week's guest, given that I'm traveling this Friday, June 21st, 2019, a few days prior, I engaged in a reversal of roles for this week's Metals and Markets podcast. Rather than my interviewing an expert in the precious metal and or financial industry, I'll be interviewed by a precious metal vlogger and YouTube channel, Dobson777A. We touch on various nuances in the high-volume bullion industry, and that discussion gets underway right after this brief message from our show's sponsor. SDBullion.com is a high-volume physical gold, silver, and precious metal dealer. Founded in March 2012 with the goal of providing the lowest cost bullion available, SD Bullion has become one of the largest US-based precious metal dealers and is regularly recognized by Inc. magazine as one of America's fastest growing companies. We are committed to being your trusted source for low-cost, highest quality, investment-grade bullion products. Visit sdbullion.com for more information.
I've got James Anderson from SD Bullion on the line, and here's a chance that we can ask some of the questions that you've been asking me for a long time. So we're going to go through with James and see what we can learn today. So James, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Robert. Thanks for having me on your channel.
Great. Hey, can you tell us a little bit where your company's located and about your company itself?
Sure. So our company started in 2012. It was an offshoot of a precious metal news website that started in 2011 called Silver Doctors. Silver Doctors came about right around the time that precious metals were peaking in price, especially silver. It came about in the spring of 2011 when silver was running towards $50. And then gold obviously peaked that August later on when the U.S. debt got downgraded. I think gold, hit over $1,900 an ounce. And so that the website basically fit the niche of, if you know anything about alternative financial websites, you probably heard of zerohedge.com. Zerohedge.com, when it first started, they didn't know anything about precious metals, and they didn't actually even talk about precious metals until maybe around 2011. And even then, the way that they spoke about it was simply in a derivative context. They didn't understand much about the physical market. And so we essentially at Silver Doctors, when we started, it fit that niche of being able to talk to and on behalf of the people that are actually buying the physical products. So what we did was, we had a lot of success with that blog in 2011, and it kind of grew into a situation where, we have all these people coming to our website, and we're looking at the competition out there in terms of who's doing what in the physical realm, in the dealerships. We thought we could do a better job and be able to offer the same products at a lower price, so long as we stuck to very good systems and low overhead, basically a humble way about going with our business in order to pass those savings along to the customer. And so that's essentially how it started in 2012. We work out of Southeast Michigan as well. We have some administrative offices in the Toledo, Ohio area. And so when you look across the spectrum of all the bullion dealers in the nation, especially the largest ones, we feel that our situation is pretty good because the city that we're in has a lot of good talent, young folks who are really good on the front lines for us, a lot of great kids that work with our teams, young people just out of college. And then as well, Toledo, Ohio is not the most expensive place. It's a lot cheaper than, say, New York City or Charlotte, North Carolina, what have you. It's definitely a cheaper city in the Midwest to have a business to be able to operate in. And so that allows us then to pass along savings. And that's a big reason why we're based out of Toledo.
Yeah, we've been doing comparative shopping of all of the different online dealers, at least the main ones that my folks have been interested in, or my channel. And you guys are definitely very competitive. So we've been pleased to be able to get you on the phone to talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, remember, we're selling like-kind product a lot of times. It's rare that you have products that are unique only to your dealership. You might have a handful of those, but in the end, the ones that move the needle in terms of people wanting to buy in heavy volume, they're usually homogeneous like-kind products like American Silver Eagles or Silver Town rounds or, Sunshine Minting rounds, this or that. We're talking about, the top 10 bullion products that are sold year in, year out. There's thousands of people selling that product. So how do you differentiate yourself? Usually it's with price and service. And so that's what we try and focus on.
Yep, excellent. Hey, can you tell us about when somebody buys, just like we talked about, gold and silver eagles or buffaloes, anonymity? How do you maintain anonymity for these purchases?
So if you're going to go to the farthest extreme of anonymity in terms of I want to be able to buy bullion without having anyone know me, it's very difficult because you have a couple options, right? You could perhaps buy locally if you're in a big enough town where there's enough local dealers where the prices aren't ridiculous, or you could buy online. But there's various methodologies you could use perhaps to keep the amount of information that you're giving away to as limited as possible, and even where it's being delivered possibly to be a little bit more private. So I suppose the first thing is if you're talking about a local dealership, if you're buying, you can buy in cash up to a certain quantity. In the United States, since the early 70s, we have anti-money laundering laws, which essentially make sure that drug dealers and nefarious people in our economy aren't laundering money through precious metals or other methodologies. Sometimes it's in casinos, they launder money or this or that. So you have to be very careful. You can't just walk into a local coin dealer and be like, hey, here's $20,000. I'd like a tube of gold eagles and a half, please. You can't do that. Once you clip over $10,000, there has to be reporting involved. The IRS is going to be notified, etc. So you can't either, just go 5 days in a row to the same local coin shop with $8,000 5 days in a row. That triggers those reporting requirements. The dealer doesn't do that.
Yeah, they call that structuring when
Correct.
you're trying to break it into smaller amounts, and that'll trigger. And but if you lose some anonymity when you go with like a check or other things, but you avoid the reporting because it's easily tracked that way, where cash can't be. Correct?
Well, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. When I was trained 10 years ago by one of the names in this industry that does the AML training, I mean, he literally said to me, look, if you wanted to launder hundreds of thousands of dollars in a large city like Los Angeles, and you know what you're doing, you could do it, even with the $10,000 threshold. I mean, there's hundreds of shops around here. We're talking We Buy Gold shops and various things like that. So he admitted as such. It's simply just knowing what the rules are and making your choices from there. And so if you really care that much about anonymity and you want to, be as private as possible, just go ahead and research it. Learn what the AML statutes are. Go do the research and find that out for yourself. And then when you go to buy, if you're just buying locally, you should definitely be buying cash on the barrel, meaning if you can, buy the same day with cash. Don't, if you're buying a large amount, like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, then you literally have to leave a check typically with the dealer and hope that they'll call you in a few days with the product. I mean, essentially what they're doing is they're just simply buying it from the wholesale market, waiting on it to be delivered to their coin shop and then calling you. But that's fallen through before. I mean, I've seen, I don't know if you remember Tolving, but the Tolving debacle occurred, and there were local coin shops who were buying from Tolving, where the money of the customer got tied up with Tolving, and the local coin shop couldn't deliver, and the local buyer was out, $20,000, $30,000, right? Yeah. So this is not to say local coin shops aren't good. They just have different business models. They have more overhead. It's more expensive to have a local coin shop because of all the security required to allow the public to walk into your store and to peruse all the items that are there. Because let's face it, overnight, those items, those are risky to be keeping in the same building overnight, year in, year out. They get clocked and they get looked at and thought about, in terms of criminality. So it's kind of.
So let me point out that nobody on my channel is trying to avoid the law. We're just trying to make sure that we're, our data is just not publicly going anywhere. You know how many places are. So just this year alone, my CPA was hacked, right? And so my return was filed before I had even filed my return by some nefarious guy, and then we had. About 3 years ago, the government lost control of anybody that had Secret Service clearance, all of the data that we had to fill out. If you know what a Secret Service, I mean, they actually go interview your neighbors and everybody else. And so anyways, it's been a mess. And even now Quest Diagnostics has been hacked. So what do you have as far as those kind of controls for people, that are even paying with, credit cards and other things? Are you guys, taking care of the data?
Yeah, we do not share any data with any third parties. The only data that gets used perhaps with third parties is when you're placing orders using the credit card or debit card to lock in the price. That's going to require a merchant account, and so there'll be some data that flows through to a merchant account, but that data should be secure as well, right? But there's no guarantees in life, and so my suggestion, if you have a real concern about, you want to make sure that wherever you intend to store the precious metals, if you're buying it online and you really don't want the delivery man showing up with heavy boxes at your door where you intend on actually storing the stuff, and you just don't want the mailman even knowing, you could, if you theoretically want to, you could just set up a P.O. box, say for the time frame that you intend on purchasing the bullion. Have it shipped to the P.O. box, and then once you're done ordering and placing those large positions, then you can cancel the P.O. box, right? I mean, it's just a way then for you to pick it up at the post service itself and then drive it off to wherever you're going to hold it eventually. That's one methodology you can use.
I've done that before when it's delivered by like UPS. I just adjust the delivery to the UPS office and pick it up there. So that is a good approach.
You do have to be careful with that, because once you do that, sometimes it breaks the insurance agreement that you have with the dealer, because those UPS offices, not that secure, and the employees there, they're not as, in my experience, UPS and FedEx, there's more theft in the bullion industry with those two private couriers, because the employees of those two private couriers, they have less invested compared to a USPS person who's delivering, because the USPS guy, remember, the reason why he has that job is typically because of the pension slush fund, right? And if they get caught doing anything like that, Postmaster General shows up and they get thrown in federal jail. Whereas the FedEx or the UPS guy, he's getting paid, what, $10 an hour. I'm sure he can rationalize stealing some boxes here and there. And it's just the amount of risk that they're running is not even close to compared as the USPS guy. And I know that USPS is clunky and everybody likes to badmouth them, but they actually do a really incredible service for the price points that they put it at. I mean, it's basically subsidized by the government, so why don't you take advantage of it?
Well, and I will tell you, I had to ship a large dollar amount one time with the post office, and they actually have secure bags that the things go in locks, and then they have tracking throughout the whole process so that, they make sure their employees, are kept honest as well.
Yeah, you're talking about USPS registered mail, which is the highest secure way you can ship anything in the United States. Literally, the Secret Service uses it for their documents that are the highest official documents. And diamond dealers in the New York area use USPS registered. When a customer is selling back to us and they're shipping us a heavy amount, we always tell them USPS registered, and or we offer them private courier service with third-party insurance plans. So if you're doing it on your own, literally go look at the FedEx or the UPS agreements. It says you are not to ship any precious metals with us. So essentially, if you ship anything with FedEx or UPS and it gets stolen or lost, you could be completely out in terms of getting anything back. Whereas if you use USPS registered mail, it's going to be slower, but it's going to get there, and it's going to get there in full.
So that kind of leads us into, if somebody wanted to send something back to you for you to purchase, you have a process where you would call first, say, here's what I want to sell, and you would give like a quote over the phone. And you have some minimum dollar or quantity, or what is it that you would normally do for when somebody wanted to send something back?
Right. So we have a dedicated URL for people who want to sell back to us. It's just sdbullion.com/sell. And so there you'll get price quotes for, large lot sales to us. So if you're selling us, say, 500 ounces of silver, the price should be quoted right there for the product that you want to sell at. But if you're selling a smaller allotment, just give us a call and we'll give you a quote. There's no risk to it. You just get a quote. If you like the price, you can lock it in. If you don't, you can walk or call us back later. So you can shop around and do that if you'd like. It's completely up to you. There's not necessarily a minimum requirement. I mean, you could try and call us up theoretically and talk us into buying 1 ounce of silver from you. But you have to think in terms of the transaction costs that are required and the amount of work required to ship a few ounces of silver here or there. It may not be worth anybody's interest, right? So if you're selling small allotments, very small allotments, that's why it's, sometimes behooves you to have a good relationship with a local dealer if you do have any in your town. Because if you need quick cash for a few ounces here or there, I mean, that's just an easy way to do it.
Yep. Hey, I was curious. I don't want to give away any securities, but do you deal with like a depository for the majority of your sales where, you have them storing your materials and then it's shipped from there, or is this something that you have your own facility?
Well, that's a big differentiator between ourselves and a lot of our competitors. A lot of our competitors end up using some third-party logistics firm who doesn't have the same interests or desire to take care of the customer as we do. Because if the customer's not taken care of, who's getting the brunt of it? We are, not them, right? So we vertically integrated a lot of our business model so we had full autonomy from top to bottom. And so therefore a vast majority of the parcels moving out to our customers are coming out of Southeast Michigan. And so that allows us full autonomy in the packaging and the shipping and the choices that we make along the way to make sure that the customer is satisfied and happy. I would say when I'm in the back of the pick, pack, and ship operation, first of all, it takes a while for me to get in there because I have to get screened and go through the whole rigmarole for security, and it's totally understandable. I get exactly why we have to do that. But once I'm in there and I start watching, these guys and the work that they're doing, and when you receive a parcel from us, you'll see even if you shook it much, typically the products are secure so much that you can't hear it sound. Now, there is one variant sometimes where the tubes of silver sometimes or gold, they have like a security label or a hologram on the tube. So we don't like to cut those and we usually do open the tubes and stick styrofoam inside so it's very compressed and it doesn't shake and rattle. But there are times when they have these, highfalutin holograms on top, and say we cut those and stuff styrofoam in them. You know what'll happen? The customer will call us up and tell us, "Oh, I want a new tube because this hologram is not perfect," and so then it becomes a huge problem in terms of customer service. So we choose to allow it to make noise, a little bit of rattling on its way to you if it does have a hologram tube on it. But for the most part, I'd say 90 percentile, a high 90 percentile of the parcels we ship out are fully packed, fully secured, glued inside, packed box in, box in, box in, bag in. So it's very, very difficult for things to shift around or move. So opening it requires, a nice knife, a nice saw knife to open it and get in there. And anybody who's ever gotten a parcel from us, that's one of the comments we hear a lot of times. It's just how well it's been packed.
Yep. I was very happy with my package, except for I had peanut dust all over me, but it was, next time I'll open it outside, but it was very well packaged.
Yeah.
So I thought if you wouldn't mind, we'd go through a few things on your website. I spent some pretty good amount of time going through each one of the tabs, and one of the things that I found was really interesting. You guys actually sell safes and vaults. So are you at a computer where you can see what I'm seeing?
Sure.
Okay. So I just clicked on the other, and then I went to safes and vaults, and we just went through this on my channel, several different options for storing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe we'll just click on the Israeli Bullion Ultra Vaults first.
Okay.
I want one of the vault doors myself.
Yeah.
So I went down a little bit farther to the bottom here to try to find something. I found, let's look at the 2.71 cubic foot. Mm-hmm. So this is 2424. And some of what we had investigated, they said you wanted to have, not only, fire safety, but you wanted like tool and torch. Make it a little more difficult for somebody to try to get in. So there was a UL rating, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think each one of these, when I was clicking on them, this says high resistance to intrusion by tools and torch. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is a 2 cubic foot, and then there's one right next to it that I think was 3 cubic foot. Here it says shipping and FAQs. Let's see what it says.
Yeah, it's free shipping.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. I presumed it would be. Yeah.
Okay, so we just verified that this includes the shipping and everything. So this is a wonderful safe here, and then they had another one right next to it. If you need something a little bigger, mm-hmm. You'd have to check the dimensions what you're planning on storing, but that would probably meet the majority of the folks' needs.
Yeah, one other point about the safes and just storing at home, et cetera. A lot of times diversification is kind of important too. So there's different methodologies you can use to help yourself in case the worst ever came to pass in your house. Let's go ahead and paint a dark picture. Let's pretend that someone shows up at your door with a gun, and they're holding you, basically saying, I need whatever's in your house. I need valuables. And so maybe having a decoy safe in another spot with a little bit of something that you're willing to lose in case the worst were to come. That sometimes is a good method for diversifying some of the risk, not putting everything in one spot. But then again, of course, if you start hiding things in different spots, it starts to, it goes exponentially in terms of the ability to A, forget, B, have someone stumble upon it when they're doing something at your house, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a lot of common sense that's required when it comes to trying to safely store stuff at home.
Yep.
The other point I was going to mention is we're one of the only dealers who's offered this service, but there is an option. If you go to the top of our website under resources, you'll find Bullion home insurance, and so there's a page there about Bullion home insurance, and you can.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and so for a long time, I've been in this industry, some 11 years now, roughly. A long time, that question was always, hey, can we, my home policy, I can't insure this, can I? And if you go down the rabbit hole of home insurance policies, yeah, that's usually, it usually precludes you from being allowed to insure bullion in your home. But this company, has come about, and they're offering this service to customers. So you can definitely go down that, and check and see what the prices are. When I first investigated, when we first brought it on our website, the pricing was in line with very similar to very low cost professional storage in a vault, say, as far as the percentage that you have to pay per year based on what you're actually holding. So it was rather competitive, and it may add that just additional layer of peace of mind in case the worst were ever to come.
Okay, so let me say this. You're about ready to save me almost $1,000 here, because I just worked through my insurance company. I'm not going to say who they are, but it's a very well-known and very large company. And I did not insure numismatic coins. It was just for the value of the coins when I purchased them. And it was 2% of the value.
Yeah, it's way too much. Year. That's way too much.
Yeah, but these guys, something happened because several years ago I had a policy with them, and it was not nearly this amount now. So this is fantastic. Now, can you tell us a little bit about if you get this policy, do you have to have a certain kind of safe storage or anything to get this kind of premium, or is there something that triggers it?
No, there's no prerequisites in terms of your building or what you're keeping, where and how. If you go through the policy and you start working through the numbers, I mean, it can get to as low as just 20 basis points per year to have your bullion at home insured. And so that's the cheapest it can get typically, but 20 basis points is about as cheap as you could keep gold bullion in perhaps the most cheap, storage policy you could have with, say, a Loomis or a Brinks. That 20 basis points in the industries, it doesn't get much lower than that in terms of gold bullion vault storage fully insured.
No, it's true. And I've been looking at private vaults and everything. I've been investigating, but the problem is they're 50 miles away because I'm a long ways away from Atlanta, so I'd have to deal with that. And and then you still got to transport your stuff there, and again, who's going to know what you're doing and all that. So this is an amazing price. So what is the process for my company? I actually had to provide invoices. My purchases.
There's going to have to be some documentation. They're not just going to take your word for it. You're going to have to provide some documentation about what you are insuring and all that. But I mean, in the end, you have to trust some people when it comes to this stuff. And this company's they've been in this industry for a long time, and they're finally branching out into the retail market. And so that's essentially what this service is about. So if you have an interest, my suggestion is to go ahead and go on if you just click check our prices at the bottom, that'll kind of take you down the rabbit hole of going further down the funnel of perhaps getting the product.
No, this is wonderful. I'm so glad I talked to you, because I did not find this in my exploration of your website. Well, this is going to be a huge thing that I'll be advertising for you guys, because like I said, you probably saved me $1,000.
Well, that's great. That's great. I mean, that's why we try and get out here and talk to people, because I don't think sometimes when they're on our website they realize all the things that are there.
Yep. Okay, so let's go to, how about we go through Doc's deals?
Sure.
tell you one thing I saw floating across the bar on the homepage was your 100-ounce bar. I still want to get me one of those one of these days.
Mm-hmm. What
So
kind?
I'm just scanning through here. What's that?
Oh, is there a certain hallmark you want, or just any old hallmark?
Well, no, there was a Sheffield smelting bar that's
Yeah.
serialized and everything. That was a fantastic looking deal for 100 ounce. And it's just, it's a want, not a need, but
Right.
I've been looking.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, these things were under $1,500, and I noticed now they're $1,600. But the price changes, so you got to keep an eye on it.
Sure.
All right. So, anything on the docs page you want to point out? I see some $100 face bags and
Sure.
gold coin blowout.
So we focus, week in, week out on trying to bring the best products that we can at the best prices, and it's a full-time job. There's one of the executives of the company. That's what he does every day. He's there beating down, trying to figure out from the mints which products he can get at what price, and trying to come up with the best deals where everyone wins. What we're trying to come up with are wins across the board, not just for ourselves as a business, but for our customer base and for the people, the mints, the people that supply these products. We want them to move their products and to do it in an efficient fashion. And so it requires a lot of work and to try and come up with the best options for people. So that's what this is, week in, week out. You're going to find products here. Sometimes it'll be because we have too much in our inventory and we need to lessen it down. Other times it'll be because the mint and us have struck an agreement to do this certain sale for a certain amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing that we are always consistently pretty good on is the 90% silver. We do a very good job of sourcing 90% silver. If you've ever been into, if you go into where we pick, back, and ship, we have this huge 90% coin machine that essentially separates and counts the various coins for the bags, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you'll find that that's something that we focus on. If you go to look at our 90% prices, they're typically the lowest in the industry.
Do you ever have like a bag mixed so it's like fractional?
You meaning like dimes, quarters, that type of thing, or?
Yeah, dimes, quarters, nickels, half dollars, so you have like a bag.
For sure, yeah. If you go and click on our 90% silver coin dollars page, and you go to the junk silver page, you can find bags that are pretty tiny and reasonable in price, and they're mixed. Let's see here. I'm just going to scroll down and see if we can find one that's mixed. Yeah, $100 face bag is I think one of the tiniest that we offer. There's even a $10 face bag. Most of them, though, seem to be very explicit as to what's in the bag.
That's what I'm saying. I was just wondering if anybody had ever come up with the idea of mixing it, because that's where I hear a lot of concerns. It's like, okay, if silver goes to $140 an ounce, you need to have dimes, and nickels and quarters, and rather than just having dollars and half. So I was just curious if anybody had ever thought of that.
Yeah. Of course, I think we've done it mixed bags before. I don't see one sitting in our SKUs at the moment, but that is essentially what $10 face bags. If you're buying different lots of $10 face bags, you can of course mix it up. But you are correct. The dimes are the ones that people really love because of the small size. And there's this belief out there that at some point, and we're talking belief on the far spectrum of what could possibly happen with our economy. But there is a crowd out there who thinks that having dimes makes more sense because of the optionality of using it when the prices of silver are going up, or if they just simply have to have silver to do any bartering. It's just nice to have tinier sized pieces. And just personally, my experience, obviously the 1964 dimes with Roosevelt's his head on there. I think most Americans are going to recognize that, and they're going to know with common knowledge that before 1964, those things did have silver in them. So I would say, anybody who has an IQ above 100 in that situation would recognize that that dime does indeed have silver in it. But personally speaking, I think the Roosevelt's, the silver Mercury dimes, those things are absolutely gorgeous. To me, that's my favorite 90% silver coin. And those things, price-wise, compared to the Delaware heads, are very in line. They're very similar. Sometimes they're lower.
Yep. So I'm seeing that you have some the rolls like $5 face that you can get Roosevelt silver dimes, and then there's silver mercury dimes here. So if people want to get in cheap, you can get down just buying some rolls.
Yep.
And so that's a way to do it. Okay. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on Doc's deals you want to tell us?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's go back to the doc deal page just real quick. Yeah, it's really just a page that if you are an avid buyer who's buying week in, week out, my suggestion would be just to bookmark the page. And obviously, if you want, sign up for our newsletter because you're probably going to get an email every week explaining what our sales are for the week. But if you have it bookmarked, then it's just handy. It's right there. You click on it, and you can see what's on sale that day, that moment. That's my suggestion, just to bookmark that page because that's the go-to if you're trying to be a regular stacker or a regular buyer of various products. That's where you're going to find the most consistent, best prices.
Yeah, you even got a platinum 1 gram bar there.
Platinum,
I don't see too many of those.
Platinum it's as cheap right now versus gold as it's been in over 110 years. I don't think people really understand how ridiculously cheap platinum is right now compared to gold. And if you go down the rabbit hole of how much platinum bullion is above ground versus how much gold is above ground, it just makes you think, in 10, 20 years, is it going to be this crazy between the price of gold being much higher than platinum, or will platinum eventually start to do the catch up? And so to me, platinum, if you're a buyer of platinum, you got to have a perspective that's 5 to 10 years out. But I think it's extremely good value at $800. It may go down to $700, who knows? But in the longer term, my hunch is that we're going to 4 figures platinum prices in terms of US dollar price.
Just think about the face value of the platinum eagle is 100 and the gold eagle is 50.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with anything in reality. It's just simply an arbitrary number that the government slaps on it.
Yeah, it's just interesting though that at some point somebody thought it was more valuable to put that face value.
Oh, certainly. We remember in 2008, platinum went on a run above $2,200, I believe, and you had gold around 1,000. So there's been situations where platinum has been twice the price of gold, and if that's happened once in history, chances are it can happen again. So it's just one of those things.
Yep. So I noticed that you also have ancient coins.
Sure.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. So where did I find that now? Was it under, here it is, it's under silver.
Okay.
You go down to other silver, you have ancient silver coins. It's the bottom of the other
bottom
silver.
Bottom right. Got it. All right,
Yep.
Cool. Oh, yeah.
So this is something that I don't see this in a lot of the other sites. So I thought this was kind of interesting that I wanted to point out because, you can find some things in here that are, well, I mean, Caesar, that's got to be, 2,000 years old coins?
Yeah. This is not, I mean, the fact that we have these SKUs on our website, they're definitely interesting in terms of, the pictures and the history of these coins. This is not our specialty. Obviously, our name's SD Bullion, right? So what we try to suggest to customers is that bullion is what should be vastly covering their precious metal portfolio. There is room, though, for these great collectibles, these incredible historic numismatic coins. They do have a place, especially if it's a hobby of yours. Oh, no doubt. It's definitely interesting. But yeah, these coins are, 2,000 years old. I mean, it's amazing. These were around when Jesus Christ was around. It's mind-boggling, completely mind-boggling.
Yep. Well, that's very interesting. So I want you to put on your hat and tell me what silver is going to be in 10 years.
Yeah. I'll put on my omniscience hat, right? And I'll ask God for the answer because only He knows.
You
right?
got to get your crystal ball out and tell me what it's going to be. And
so I did a video a couple weeks ago. I do the Friday videos for the Silver Doctors YouTube channel. It's called Metals and Markets. I've been doing it for about a year and a half. And most of the time I interview people in the industry and talk to them about what their takes are and what's going on, et cetera. But there's a couple times where an interview falls through, for whatever reason, last minute, and I kind of have to make videos out of scratch. And I have different topics that I've always wanted to talk about. And I made a video called "When's Best to Sell Silver and Gold," right? And it's on the Silver Doctors YouTube channel. It has like 4,000 or 5,000 hits, and I don't care. It's not about the views. It's really about the information. And eventually, when people are looking that up, they'll probably end up finding the video. And in that video, I demonstrate various charts. If you're looking back in time, there's a chart that shows aggregated data ever since the fiat currency system started, full fiat currency system started in 1971, right? Ever since Nixon cut the tie of gold from the US dollar. So it goes all the way back from 1970 to today in the full fiat currency era. And it aggregates the gold price day to day, and it aggregates the silver price day to day. And it separates between the Western market and the Eastern market. And in that separation, there's a big divergence between the two lines that began in about 1985. And it coincides with around the same time that the LBMA began trading in gold and silver prices. And if anyone knows anything about gold price discovery or silver price discovery, they'll start to learn that the price discovery typically, high 90 percentile of the time, is dictated by derivatives, by synthetic gold and silver contracts that represent supposedly gold or silver, and not necessarily people actually buying and selling the real thing. It's simply a bunch of trading going on based on where the price action goes is based on where those derivatives are being traded. And so basically when you look at that chart, you will see from the mid 80s all the way to today, there's been a couple times where the Western price, it starts to revert back toward the Eastern price. And when those two things start happening, that's when you know that the silver market is in bullish mode. And if you go back and look on the last 20, 30 years, every time that those two have kind of emerged together, that was usually a pretty good time to start reallocating some of your bullion into perhaps other investment classes. Okay, I'm not telling you to sell everything. What I am suggesting is that you're probably sitting in a position then where your bullion portfolio is too large compared to everything else that you have in your investments and your savings. And so at those moments when the Western price is finally catching back up to where it likely should be, had we not had all these derivatives, kind of mocking up the price that we look at day to day, this theoretical price discovery system that we have, when it starts to go back toward the Eastern price discovery, that's when you really ought to think hard and fast about diverging some of your bullion portfolio into other asset classes. So that was my suggestion in the video. And right now, that price for silver is roughly $85. Okay, if you have a Western price, it starts driving back to that Western line starts driving back up to the Eastern line, they'll meet around the $85 mark. And so fair value at the moment is my suggestion is about that, about $85 an ounce. There's people who talk about triple digit silver, and I have no doubt that that's likely going to happen at some point in our lives. If you have a 10, 20 year lifespan ahead of you, I think triple digit silver is a pretty safe bet. The question, of course, is, well, what's the dollar going to buy you at that point? Lord knows. But $50 silver has been tested twice, and both times it's failed. Silver, and if you compare it to all the other precious metals, is the most undervalued by far. And platinum is cheap right now, but silver is just dirt cheap in a historical context. I think gold-silver ratio is 90 right now. That's only 10 or so away from the all-time record high of just over 100. And we only reached that a couple times in the Great Depression in the 1930s. So silver in terms of price, in terms of its value at the moment, is just absolutely dirt cheap. And my point is, you hold gold and silver mainly for insurance, but there are times where it outperforms everything else. And in those outperformance moments, that's when you're going to want to diverge some of it into something else likely.
Yeah, we've talked about that, money moves where it's treated best. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be some periods of time where all of a sudden gold and silver become overpriced and you need to rotate into something like, in 2012, real estate was severely undervalued.
Yep.
And so that was the chance to make your money. And so now I see, mining companies, precious metal miners and precious metals themselves appear to be undervalued. So we're rotating in and we'll wait until the time comes and figure out what's the next thing that's undervalued.
Yeah. And it's
play it that way.
And you're totally right. And it's not simply just waiting and then figuring it out. I would figure it out along the way, right? You got to keep your radar up. You got to keep your antenna up on all asset classes and trying to figure out. Any shrewd investors doing that at all times, and they're trying to look out 10, 20 years and think, well, what's the next class that's going to really, perform and perhaps go into a bubble? Because that's essentially what the powers that be love to do, is just blow bubbles. So if we're just going to keep doing this boom bust bubble cycle, you kind of have to try and figure out, well, what's the next bubble?
We kind of covered everything. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell everyone?
Yeah, I mean, and just on that bubble point, I mean, George Soros a few years back made a lot of noise when he made a quote saying, because gold was right near $1,900 an ounce, and people were going crazy saying that was expensive. And George Soros was more or less taking, his quote essentially said that gold is the ultimate bubble. Not saying at the time that gold was a bubble at that moment. He's saying that ultimately, when this whole thing plays out, gold is the last thing that goes into the bubble, right? If you have gold in a bubble, that means your system's probably going to need rejiggering. And that's the problem is when gold is doing its extremely best, it's going to be the scariest moment because you don't know what the next system looks like. And that's going to be very, very difficult. So that's why, having gold always makes sense in a certain percentage of your portfolio, and silver too. And the other precious metals too. I mean, if you go and look back at the data, I've done the backtest research. A guy by the name of Jeff Christian did a really great study, posted it on our website. You can find it. It's called, if you just Google search gold allocation backtest 1968 to 2016 SD Bullion, you'll find the article. It's a great article, and it covers gold in the full fiat currency era and how it's performed in the last 50 years roughly. And you'll be surprised, I think, if you find out what the allocation was, appropriate if you had a mix between bullion, stocks, and bonds. You'll be surprised, I think, when you'll just find out what the correct risk-reward allocation was among the three.
All right, what I'll do is I'll try to add that as a reference into, I'll find it and put it into the description.
Sure.
And that'll be good. So, hey, this has been a great interview. I learned something. I'm definitely going to do further investigation on the insurance because I'm telling you right now, it looks like it's going to save me about $1,000. That's huge. I'm saving $1,000.
I'm happy that we stumbled upon that.
I'm going to have to go buy me a face bag of silver now with the savings, right?
Yeah. And if you get nerdy like me, I actually did a video. A lot of people, this is kind of controversy. It sparks a little controversy amongst the 90% collectors. But remember, when you're buying 90% from us, those coins have probably been picked through about 50 different times throughout their life cycle. So it's 99.9% chance that the coins that you buy from us for 90% are common. There's nothing, it's going to be extremely rare that you would find a coin that was somehow never found before that was a rare coin. But it could happen. It's not like if you're a coin collector, you shouldn't look through it and try and see. But for me, I did this video about cleaning junk silver for SD Bullion. It's on YouTube, and I got this jewelry cleaner from I believe I got it off Amazon. It's Chinese made, but it's pretty good. It's got a heavy base. You put the junk silver in there with the water and a little bit of Dawn soap, and you let it run for an hour. The water becomes disgustingly brown. You pour it out, you filter it. You do this maybe 4 or 5 different rotations. And by the time the coins are done, they look literally like they just came off the press. And when you see these coins clean in the version that our forefathers got them in, it just takes your breath away to think that was our society, that was our money, that was in our pockets. Yeah. It just really makes you appreciate what we've built, what made us great, what made this country sound was the fact that we had contracts and things where people weren't getting corroded. Their savings weren't getting stolen slowly, and it wasn't building all this aggression that we see now in our culture.
Correct. Yep, it was real money.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I thank you for your time.
Sure.
This has been very enlightening, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments. So make sure you monitor because you may have to answer a few questions.
Yeah, that's no problem. And I'll be sure also to backlink this video. I'll have it embedded in our SD Bullion blog section, which I most of the content you find there is going to be written by me and created by myself. Yep. So in the blog content, we'll definitely post this interview so people can hear it.
Yeah, and I should have said at the beginning, this is Dobson 777A channel. So, all right. Well, I appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll talk again. And thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having us on.